bisexual mental health and suicide. This is a little depressing, so if you want to hold the hand of the person next to you. I by no means want you to take away from this that bisexuals are crazy or being bisexual causes craziness. Rather, there's a great deal of stigma associated with being bisexual. A researcher by the name of Gregory Herrick has looked at this, and he found that bisexuals are hated more than any other group in the country, hated more than gays and lesbians, and the only group hated more than bisexuals was IV drug users. So when you have a lot of stigma, you have what's called minority stress. And minority stress is due to anything from microaggressions, which a microaggression is a little thing, but you go out to a restaurant with a friend, which all bisexuals are used to this, and they say anything, comes out, you're bisexual, we gotta pick a side. Or, gee, I thought all bisexuals were lying, cheating sluts, And you're just out, they say this stuff to us, and you're just out for a good time with friends, but now your blood pressure's up. It's a little thing, you're not being beaten up. Discrimination, it's not well known, but Don't Ask, Don't Tell was specifically written gay, lesbian, and bisexual. And the first bisexual discharged under this, Cliff Arneson, who fought against Don't Ask, Don't Tell all his life, points out he didn't get half a discharge. Physical attacks, the FBI tracks hate crimes, and there are hate crimes specifically against bisexuals. So all of that leads to minority stress, mental illness. Minority stress starts young. I like your GASM, but it's usually gender and sexual minorities in the research. That's how LGBTQIA, quilt bag, it's now referred to as sexual minorities. So sexual minority individuals were more likely to experience sexual abuse, parental physical abuse, or assault at school, or to miss school through fear. And bisexuals had the highest rates of all of that. So since the fear was due to real harassment and attacks at school of various kinds, bisexuals are even more likely than gay and lesbian students to drop out. And research does prove that minority stress leads to mental illness and suicide. So rates of suicide are the highest in the first 2 years after coming out to their families. Many different studies have been done in many different cities, but and in all of this, all the studies I'm reporting on, the samples of trans people were too small, so I'm really mostly talking about lesbian, gay, and bi people. But leaving out trans people, bisexuals have the highest rates of suicide, with about a third of bisexual teenagers making suicide attempts, and about a quarter in gay and lesbian teenagers. So the main contributor to sexual minority suicide is a fear of being rejected by family members. In a study published in the journal Pediatrics in 2008, those who experienced high levels of family rejection were 8 times more likely to have attempted suicide, 6 times more likely to suffer severe depression, and were also more likely to use recreational drugs or engage in unprotected sex. And another study found that a substantial proportion of youth who disclose a sexual minority sexual orientation to their families are assaulted by members of their family, while many others are threatened or verbally and emotionally abused. So actually, some research that just came out shows that for adults, your mental health is improved if you come out, but I act as an advisor to the local bisexual online groups, and they will often send questions to me from all around the country. When the kids ask me, should I come out to my parents? I'll say, where are you? How old are you? And if they're like deep south and they're 14, because of all of this, I'll say no. Wait till you're out of college and you're safe. And the average age of coming out is 25 to 29. And I think this is why. So if you get asked that question, you gotta think about where's the kid, and how old are they? Because it's not safe, and you don't want somebody to be homeless. Better to keep it quiet. And the stigma and minority stress continues into adulthood. with a study which was just released showing that bisexual women are nearly 3 times as likely to be raped as lesbian or straight women. The following results are from another big recent research study, the Bisexual Invisibility Report, compiled by Linda Susan Ulrich in 2008. Bisexual people experience greater health disparities than the broader population, including, same thing that was found in an earlier study, a greater likelihood of suffering from depression and other mood or anxiety disorders. Bisexual women in relationships with monosexual partners have an increased rate of domestic violence compared to women in other demographic categories. A 2010 study compared lesbians and bisexual women. They found that bisexual women had significantly lower levels of education, were more likely to be poor, less likely to have health insurance, more likely to be current smokers and acute drinkers, more likely to be in poor general health and in frequent mental distress. Now, this was San Francisco. What was interesting is the mental distress was similar if they lived in non-urban areas. When they moved to urban areas, the lesbians' mental distress dropped, the bisexuals increased. And it was hypothesized that particularly for San Francisco, the lesbians found a support. The bisexuals did not have a supportive community in San Francisco. And again, in adulthood, bisexuals, nearly half of bisexual women and more than a third of bisexual men had considered or attempted taking their own lives. So we have to ask ourselves why. And I'd be interested in feedback from you because I got some theories here. I think part of all of this is an artifact and part of it is real. So we need to look at privilege levels. So if you're white, if you're straight, if you're male, cisgendered, you have very high levels of privilege. As we've just seen, gay and lesbian, less hated than bisexual. If you're a female, you already drop in privilege. If you're black, you have no privileges, kind of down there below the floor somewhere. And other other minorities, you know, different rankings. So, and as we saw from some of the things that Ron presented, people will be having sex with more than one gender, but not calling themselves bisexual. I've learned to never tell anybody how to identify because I don't like the shrieking and the yelling when, you know. People don't want to give up privilege. So if you're up here, you got all this privilege, nobody's going to give that up. So you drop some if you identify as gay or lesbian. You drop a lot if you identify as bisexual. If you're female, you saw that more women identify as female. You're already female. You lost a lot of privilege. You don't lose so much privilege if you identify as bisexual. If you walk out the door in the morning and you're black, you know, you've got no privilege, you know. So research shows a lot more people of color identify as bisexual than white people because part of it, I believe, is there's a double dip of prejudice if you're black and queer. So I'm not saying there's no cost, but it's much less of a cost. That's one part. The second part is that there's a different narrative for white people and people of color. For white queers, you come out, you're rejected by your family, you move to San Francisco, New York, Providence, you find your new queer family, you're happy. But for people of color, for people of color, your family is your bulwark against racism. You do not move away from your family, and you don't have the money to move to those places anyway. So you don't move away from your family. You stay with your family. And indeed, in a 2010 study of sexual minority parents of color, the majority of Black, Latino, and Asian parents said they were supported by their families as a sexual minority. 2 out of 5 said they were completely supported by their families. By contrast, white sexual minority parents more often report a lack of support from parents, siblings, and other blood relatives, with relationships disrupted as a result of prejudice after coming out as LGBT. So I think what's happening is that if you're white, you don't want to lose that prejudice. You want to bond with the gay and lesbian community. Everybody's, and research shows that people who identify as gay and lesbian are having, opposite gender sex just about as much as people who are identifying as bisexual, but they're identifying as gay and lesbian, keeping their privilege, bonding with the gay and lesbian community. People of color are identifying as bisexual. So, but what happens is that then they're having the problems associated with poverty. And so these mental health findings, and what we're talking about here really is poverty. And there is a huge mental health stress associated with poverty. It is really hard to be poor. So the differences are really the differences between people who have access to mental health services, education, and people who don't. So part of it is not real. But then part of it is real because of the huge stigma. So if you get more abuse at home, leading to, and more bullying in school, leading to homelessness, dropping out of school, if you're there in the street and you just will do anything to feel better, more substance abuse, hooking up with inappropriate people who may beat you, leading to more substance abuse, it is going to be more real mental illness in the community. But again, due to stigma, not because of anything wrong with, a bisexual brain. So, but now we need to sort of talk about what can we do. One is even the pediatric study that I mentioned, getting word out about that study. It showed that even if a family moves from being hostile to their children being member of a sexual minority to just neutral about it. So just stop giving them a hard time and be neutral. That it risks it decreases their risk of suicide. Family connectedness, including the ability of youth to talk with parents, youth feeling cared about and understood, and the family having fun together, has been shown to reduce the risk of suicidal ideation and suicide attempts for some sexual minority groups by half. Thus, programs that help build family support are important. Supporting the inclusion of bisexuals in PFLAG groups, LGBT youth support groups, gay-straight alliances, so on. The middle school years have a tremendous impact on the social and academic development of adolescents. Middle schools have the power to either improve psychological functioning of youth or compromise it. In one study, all children, regardless of sexual orientation, reported the lowest levels of depression and suicidality and the lowest levels of truancy when in a positive school climate and when not experiencing homophobic teasing or harassment. So all of the anti-bullying stuff that's going on is incredibly important, and it works. I haven't been following my slides. Well, I hope that there's a slide on the Suicide Prevention Resource Center.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, because if you want, at the end of that report, there's many excellent recommendations for, this is a general for sexual minority youth, and you can review their recommendations. But I really think that we as a community need to think about intersectionality. And intersectionality says that the thing that happens to any of us happens to all of us, that black youth in prison who is bisexual, that all of the issues that affect him, the prison industrial complex affects all of us. And he ended up in jail because of that chain of events that I just talked about. So the bisexual community, if we want to save lives and improve mental health in the bisexual community, we have to build a bisexual community that includes all races, all ages, all genders, all income levels, and all educational levels, because we are all somewhere between straight and gay. Finally, when I was 16, now this is a long, long time ago, granted, I was the only bisexual. I knew I was bisexual. I didn't know a single other bisexual. I didn't know that there were historical figures that were bisexual. There were no out celebrities. You know, I mean, it is getting better. You know, now you can just go to Wikipedia, you know, and Google famous bisexual people and just look at a whole list, and there were all the people that, you know, Ron mentioned, and the historical, we know that in history the world was bisexual, you know, but still, many adolescents develop their sexual orientation in the absence of positive bisexual role models. It's so important that we have Kirsten Sinema, you know, in Congress, Micah Kellner representing the Upper East Side in the New York State Assembly, and even our Lady Gaga. And the Trevor Project has partnered with her to, on her current tour, going around the country with all kinds of groups, National Association of School Psychologists, Campus Pride, and at each stop of the bus, kids have access to behavioral and mental health services, school psychologists, mentoring, volunteer opportunities, and bullying and suicide prevention resources. So thank you, Trevor Project, for helping to increase bi visibility and prevent teen suicide. And now for an activity.